FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and it's 8/1/18. That means 8118. Hey, as always, be a part of the show. Send me your emails. Love getting them. Love hanging out in my local undisclosed coffee shop, reading what you have to say. Always good for a lot of laughs and a lot of fun. Again, the email address is kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, you know that we're living in an age of uncertainty, for sure. I mean, just look who is president. Nobody would have expected that except yours truly, perhaps, and a few others, but very few others. And yet here we are. So how do you live? How do you thrive in an era of uncertainty? Well, hey, Andrei Polgar back with us, written a book, The Age of Anomaly, Spotting Financial Storms in a Sea of Uncertainty. It's his second book. Andrei, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again, and thank you guys for listening.
Sure. So, age of uncertainty. Isn't every age really uncertain when you get down to it?
From certain perspectives, yes. Like I'm pretty big on economic history. So in the book, I've gone through anything from the first recorded asset bubble, from the tulip mania to, your popular ones, your dot-com bubble, your Great Recession, to modern day ones that nobody aside from myself studied, like the short domain mania of 2015 to 2016. So if you're on the lookout for craziness, yeah, you can find it everywhere. And that's kind of the key in a sense, because even if history doesn't repeat itself, it does rhyme. So we can draw parallels, we can find common denominators. But to address one of the main questions people ask me, of course, which is, okay, why should we worry about these things now? In my book, I do try to make it clear that for many reasons, there are these pockets of anomaly currently. Each of them is a perfectly valid reason to be concerned individually. And together, they just do tend to give me goosebumps. Whether we're talking about, one, our economy that has essentially been, for lack of a better term, zombified by this easy access to cheap money and occasional downright injections of capital into the system, or the geopolitical aspect with, worldwide tensions that are unprecedented due to their sheer scale. We can only imagine how a full-fledged trade war between China and the United States would look like. It would definitely be the largest trade war in the history of mankind. So that's 2. 3, of course, only once has it happened that more time passed between recessions than right now. And if another year goes by, it would be a record. So even from a cyclical perspective, we're due or overdue a correction. So I've just given 3 quick examples of things that make me try to tell people, and I'm all over YouTube, I'm all over the podcast scene. Like, I recorded approximately 100 collaborations for the launch of my book, people from all sorts of backgrounds. And I'm pretty much spreading the word to anyone who cares to listen, because at this stage in the game, I believe that the rewards associated with thinking about these things in the manner I am thinking about them are just so asymmetrically in your favor that it would be a huge mistake not to be a part of it. So essentially, depending on the audience I'm talking to, I do my best to kind of present them a message that's tailored to their needs. So, for example, since you guys are extremely willing to think about the things that are wrong in the financial system, there's little point in preaching to the choir and talking about QE or the things you already know about. So, for example, when it comes to you guys, one issue I could raise is that of timing, or that of the tendency people have when it comes to those who like precious metals. And by the way, I love precious metals, but maybe we could talk about the tendency of people have to assume that precious metals and, for example, cryptocurrencies have to be arch enemies. So yeah, I do my best based on the audience I have exposure to to kind of get them to tap into my mind. And if I can provide at least a little bit of value and a little bit of something that helps them maybe see the current world in a slightly different way, then I consider it a major victory.
Okay, so you need to perceive things differently than your everyday perceptions because we're not living in so-called normal times then? Is that a fair statement?
If there has ever been a proper context for people to make it a goal to expose themselves to different viewpoints, yes, I would say it's the present. And in my book, I'm pretty big on getting them to do this, getting them to have, as an investor, a perspective of agnosticism, not falling in love with one asset class or another. And essentially, this is, especially in the second part of the book, the value I provide. Like, I help people become, I hope at least, logic-driven, independent economic thinkers. It's never been my goal to get them hooked on one prediction of mine or another, or even one strategy that I spoon-feed them or another. So yeah, I place a lot of value. And in my book, I actually do have sub-chapters about mainstream media, about alternative media, especially since someone who, through his YouTube channel, like, I have mainstream universities who use my videos. Then again, I have lots of alternative media sources that are also big on my content and like to use it. So I feel I'm in a pretty good position to bridge various gaps and kind of help people become better rounded economic thinkers.
Mm-hmm. And becoming a better rounded economic thinker, what is involved with that?
Well, initially, a pretty compelling tendency to wash your hands. Like, I'm pretty big on telling people to venture outside their comfort zones. So, for example, Paul Krugman might not be my my favorite person in the world, but I read his column on New York Times the same way I read people on the left, on the right, across the entire spectrum. And I've made it a goal, and I talk about this in my book a little bit, I've made it a goal for myself to willingly expose myself to these various viewpoints. And initially it was awful. Like, I genuinely felt dirty on the inside and felt the need to kind of, mentally speaking, wash my hands after being exposed to something that was so out of tune with my ideology, with my way of seeing life. But nowadays, especially since I've become a content creator myself, rather than feeling disgust when I am in touch with a person who says something that's completely ideologically incompatible with myself, I tend to say, look, thank you very much for the opportunity of seeing the world from your perspective for a bit. And especially when it comes to the complex situation we find ourselves in right now, again, I think that if more people hop on board and kind of embrace this strategy of mine, if you will, it's something that's going to pay dividends forever.
So what have you learned from Paul Krugman?
Well, aside from not trusting his picks whenever he talks about technology-related stuff, I've also learned that. No, like, from Krugman, from Stiglitz, it's not. Of course, I've also learned many things from them. Like, when it comes to the work I've done with my PhD, it's been to a large degree related to just that, to how important it is for economists not to become political activists, because there's always the risk of course, you've mentioned Krugman, when it comes to many topics on this planet, if you tell me the topic, I'm probably going to be able to tell you what Krugman's opinion about it is. And that's because, once again, it's a huge mistake to become a political activist if you're an economist, because that kind of narrows down everything there is about you. So from Krugman, for example, I've learned many things about how not to be an economist, how not to, from that perspective, yeah. But whether we're talking about, stuff Stiglitz has done when it comes to inequality or their work in tangent fields to that, they have some good stuff. But even if not, even leaving the economics aside, like, even if you don't care about necessarily, the robustness of the research they do and stuff like that, even leaving that aside, it is a good, healthy exercise for your brain to kind of say, look, let me tune into what Paul Krugman has to say on New York Times today so that I see how economists on the left perceive things. The same way, it might be good, to give you an alternative media example, to watch some Mike Maloney videos, who also does good work when it comes to other stuff. And he's frequently on the opposite side of the of any trend compared to Krugman. So again, I know it's not necessarily pleasant, and I know especially many of you guys listening, whenever I say the name Paul Krugman, it probably doesn't trigger the happiest reaction in the world, but Yeah. One of the best habits I've embraced as an economist, and it's a habit I recommend to others if they want to become well-rounded economic thinkers, is just that. You don't have to agree with what he says, but you have to be kind of willing to include him in your daily consumption routine, in my opinion, of course.
So what's your plan here for the coming uncertainties or the era of uncertainties? What do you do?
First and foremost, my plans involve putting together your own strategy that enables you to have access to assets that complement one another. So speaking of, for example, precious metals and gold, because again, I'm trying to tailor my message to your audience to kind of make it relevant. And let's assume you lived in a country like Syria. You're an average family, you're an engineer, your wife is a doctor. Your wealth was an apartment, a car, let's say $10,000 worth of gold and silver, and one Bitcoin that you bought at $20,000 in December last year, so at the worst possible time. Mm-hmm. We'll then assume something bad happens in your country, and for one reason or another, you're forced to flee. Let's see what happens to your wealth. Well, the value of your real estate essentially goes to zero because you have to leave it behind. The same way, you will not most likely be able to take your car with you either, so that goes to zero as well. Your precious metals are great because they're highly portable, but if you live in a country like Syria and end up having to go to a destination country that's far, far away, there is a significant likelihood that your precious metals can be confiscated at the border, stolen, or otherwise taken away from you. Whereas when it comes to the Bitcoin that you overpaid for, even if you bought it at $20,000 and were forced to sell at $6,000. For someone in that particular scenario, it's that precise Bitcoin that you overpaid for that can enable you to start a new life because you can carry it from one country to another, quote unquote carry, by only remembering a few words. And that's an example of a scenario where it would be awesome to have crypto. The same way, as someone who also invests in domains occasionally, I'm afraid of scenarios which involve around a fragmentation of the internet or us losing access to the internet as we know it today for one reason or another. So in such a scenario, I would much rather be holding some physical precious metals than a bunch of Bitcoin. And this is kind of the message I try to get across to people. It's a message of humility. So as much as I go through economic history in the first part of my book with the intention of helping people maximize the likelihood of spotting the next financial crisis as early on as possible, in the second part of my book, I do a bit of the opposite, and I tell them, look, even if you think about these things all day, whatever black swan event triggers the next chain of events can still catch you by surprise. So it makes sense to try to put together a strategy that enables you to land on your feet in as many situations as possible. So do I know for a fact that I'm going to deal with a situation similar to the one in Syria? No, I don't. Do I know for a fact that I'm going to deal with a situation which revolves around me losing internet access? Once again, no, I don't. So I kind of try to embrace my inability to consistently and effectively predict the future and make it a part of my strategy. So therefore, personally, I would recommend that everyone takes into consideration intangible assets like cryptocurrencies that are even more transportable than precious metals. And the same way, I just as strongly recommend that people include precious metals in their portfolios. Obviously, you're hedging. So it's impossible for me to say, okay, just try this strategy and I promise that everyone's going to lose their jobs, everyone's going to have their lives ruined, but you're going to thrive and become filthy rich. I cannot offer that, unfortunately. But what I can say is that if you apply the methods I teach in my book, and if you kind of internalize these concepts and make them a part of your life, then there is an extremely high likelihood that you'll land on your feet. Not become filthy rich, not, achieve extraordinary, amazing results with little to no effort, but land on your feet. So through the age of anomaly, that's pretty much what I'm selling.
All right. And sometimes that is the best we can hope for. So you want to go over to Amazon, The Age of Anomaly. You have a website, Andrei?
Yeah, they can. People can head on over to ageofanomaly.com to find links to the various places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and so on where the books is sold. And they can find me on 1 Minute Economics by heading over to youtube.com/1 Minute Economics. By the time you hear this podcast, I think the price of my book is going to be discounted already from the usual $10 to kind of just 99 cents to make a big marketing push and celebrate the official launch of the book. And the same way, if you head over to my channel, you're going to find a contest with some awesome prizes as well. I'm easy to get in touch with. You can find my email address, my phone number, pretty much everything on YouTube.
Very well. All right. So, hey, any questions, comments, be a part of the show. Send us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, and Facebook page Financial Survival Network. And Andrei, thanks so much for coming on. Good luck with the book. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Thank you for having me again. Have a good day, guys.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.